What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS. Hi guys, and welcome to another edition of The Kevin Moore Show. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Barry Fitzgerald. Now I met Barry whilst at Contact in the Desert in the United States. Now just to give you a bit of background on Barry, Barry has nearly 30 years experience within the world of the supernatural, in which he is known and has taken him to new levels of intrigue and mystery. Now Barry appeared on all 56 episodes of Ghost Hunters International, and he headed a team on the American NBC-owned SyFy network, and explored a quandary of paranormal and supernatural phenomena around the globe. Now Barry's new line of research has taken him out of his comfort zone and into areas of Irish myth, legend and folklore, leading him into the shadowy depths of the underworld not only in Ireland but around the globe, uncovering shocking similarities between cultural stories. So enjoy my interview with Barry. Okay, well Barry, thank you for joining us here in the desert in America.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're currently in Indiana Wells, and we met up through Contact in the Desert 2018, mm-hmm. And I've met some fascinating people, and I think your story is going to be fascinating as well. So, would you say you're a full-time researcher now into the sort of esoteric, mystical side of Ireland, in a sense?
Yes, that's part of it. I'm in a migration now. I understand, moving from that, we're moving in directions now with the likes of Zohar Entertainment Group, and we've got many different projects heading in good directions, and I'm heading up those as well. So it's all good. It's all heading in the right direction, and I still keep my foot very, very grounded within the Irish soil, because that's where I get my strength from.
So have you, let me get this right, so you're a documentary maker now a little bit as well as a researcher?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoy that, it's a way that I can share. I'm not out to convince anyone of anything. I'm just saying, look folks, this is what I've experienced. I've placed myself in the environment, and I prefer not to base my work on someone else's work. And I prefer to experience it for myself and determine and contemplate and meditate on what I have encountered and experienced and understood from that particular point. And it's been a great journey.
So you've not really studied other people's material. You've never
not necessarily
gone down
no.
that road. No,
not necessarily. Again, as I said before, I prefer to find my own way, and not be influenced by other distractions. And there are many distractions out there, and I'm very easily distracted. So I try and find my own way, and it has been good. It's been enjoyable, and it's like anything else in life. It has its ups, it has its downs, but it's all about the experience.
Most definitely it is. So where did this all start for you then? What was your sort of early experiences that sort of set you on your course to do this?
Oh my goodness. Way back. I would have to go. And, a lot of people have asked me before, because I was involved with Ghost Hunters International and the SyFy channel and everything else. And they said, well, why did you do that? What got you into it? I think growing up in a house that, back in Ireland, that presented some unusual things that I got to see as a child, and I interpreted them wrong as a child. Nevertheless, it scared the living hell clean out of me. But looking at it now as an adult, there would be a completely different response at that. But those cornerstones were the things that put me to where I am today. That and my father. I absolutely adore my father, but I think as a child I wouldn't shut up. And he used to sit me down in front of the new colour television to watch Star Trek and Doctor Who and things like that. And I got to say, while starting school and starting to learn to read, I then started to sit down with the newspaper and scan the TV guide for Doctor Who, and I can remember countless times mixing it up with Doctor Hook, and I sat waiting on the TV for Doctor Who to come on, and it was Doctor Hook, and I must admit I did spawn a hatred for that man because of my mistake at such a young age to be able to read properly. But I definitely think it was those early cornerstones and that really wanted me to ask the questions why, what, when, and things like that. So that really steered me along, and that curiosity developed over the course of my life. And I was an avid reader, I got to say, a supporter of John A. Keel. I thought he was great. I read one of his books. It was called Jadoo, an amazing adventure. Almost like Indiana Jones, almost within the world of the esoteric and the supernatural and everything else. And that was many years ago. I think I was an early teen at that stage. And then one thing led to another, and I found that as life progressed, I was exceptionally determined to do things. I wanted to go and do this, and I wanted to do that, and I wanted this, and I wanted that. And I always found whenever I got it, there was always something wrong with it. and I then realized that, I said at one particular point, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be on this path anymore. I want to do my thing. And so that went through, and I had a learning curve to accept, and eventually within about 6 months I was back onto the road again, in the same road that I had just volunteered to come off, and I was back on it again. And people say to me, am I in control of my own destiny? To a point, I believe, but I think an analogy that I put in place from my own perspective is that I'm the backseat passenger in the car of destiny being driven by someone else. And that I've given over to the faith too, and say, okay, let's go. And here I am in the desert in 45-degree heat.
Yeah, exactly. It's so warm here. People have no idea. It's just nice to be inside, right? But have you had many mystical experiences?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Growing up in Ireland, we're never too far away from the likes of that. And some of the experiences could be termed positive, some negative. but I see them all as learning curves. There's so many that most of them I can barely remember, because they happen all the time now, and I just roll with it. You know, I married a beautiful woman 3 years ago, an Irish woman, and we have an exceptionally tight bond, not only physically but spiritually. That I see that connection all the time, and that I find I have great strength in that, and that's been great. But you know, I've been to different places, and understanding what the ancestors of the land have been trying to make me focus my efforts on, and trying to understand. And many of the stuff I wouldn't even have got if I was left to my own devices. But I understand that there were certain things that were put in my way, and I said, okay, you know, those signals, that's important. It may not be important now, but 6 months or a year down the line, that's going to come back into play.
Well, what were some of those powerful ones, would you say? Can you remember what some of the powerful ones were?
Oh, there was one that I was investigating, and it led to a book series called Legend Seekers, and it was about delving back into Irish mythology and folklore, just as I said, to really delve into that nature of the ancient past, and if there's anything still in the landscape today. And we came across this particular story that was called we called it the Island of the Dead. I went, oh, okay, there could be a great story in this, and off we went. And the idea of these particular stories were about designing and reaching our youth, to get them away from behind the PlayStations and the Xboxes, and get them back, entice them back into the countryside. We did this. We applied, or we gave GPS coordinates and everything else to these places, but this one was different. This one, it was known as a gateway almost to another place, and you know, and I've heard many stories in my time, and many of them you go, oh yeah, and you go there and there's nothing at all. And I think with that particular mindset I had whenever I went, because we were told that this gateway had been here for a long time, and no one seemed to know just how long it had been there on the island. And the church then got involved. They built on the island. Then something happened. So we headed off. The church still owned the island, and we got permission to go. And we were told by the representative of the church, there's nothing on that island. And I said, you know, we brought 16th century maps. We said, well, there's maps there that show the buildings. They're wrong. They're wrong. So there was this that was going on that we were intrigued by. Well, why they're so adamant that this is not here? It doesn't really matter. And we headed off, and we had to row across this very dangerous lake to get there. And on the map, it showed from the 16th century that the island was split in two. The west side had all this beautiful lush fern and everything else, and it was seen as being a very positive side. In fact, it was known as the Garden of the Angels. And I said, okay, you know, the religious connotations on it, just let it go with it. But the other side had this is where the demons were said to be. And there were these circles in place as well, and people were coming right all across medieval Europe to stay at this location, and it became known as St. Patrick's Purgatory. St. Patrick's the pagan saint, or St. Patrick is the patron saint of Ireland, and so these people were coming across. They were experiencing this, which placed them. It challenged them, allegedly spiritually and physically, to the edge of death, and these were the stories that were being told, and off we went. We got to that island, and I got to say, even today, even though no one has been on that island, there is a very, very distinct line of vegetation that does split the island in half, which I thought that is very unusual that has stayed there like that, considering no one has been on it since. And lo and behold, in the fern, that was many places was over our heads, in the Garden of the Angels, we find these structures that we were told were not there. And everything matched the maps that we had in our hand. So as the night started to fall, we pitched our tents, and the only place we could pitch the tents was in the rough side. And in these particular circles, in fact, that the people from medieval Europe were coming to spend the nights in. But I gotta say, at that particular point in time, as the sun was starting to set, everything up until that point was grand. It was fantastic. But there was a distinct change in the energy on the island. And that we started to pick up on. And I was with a guy, my co-author, Cormac Strain. He doesn't pick up on anything like that. He's a very nuts and bolts type of guy. And even he was noticing this, and I thought, this is odd. But over the course of the night, I'm an avid star watcher. I love the nighttime sky and the pondering that I do, looking at the stars. I wonder what if and how did this happen and everything else. That particular night, there was a full moon, which came up over the back of the mountains and across the lake. I never came out of the tent. I stayed there. And Cormac never came out of his tent. Now, I was with my dog, and if I gotta say, if I've ever had someone who was a soul protector, it was him. So connected, I've never seen anything just quite like it before. But he buried his head underneath my sleeping bag and wouldn't come out. And he's a large dog. He's a half husky, and he wouldn't come out. And as I was lying, I could feel this wave after wave after wave was coming through, washing through the tent. And I gotta say, it was actually very unnerving. And I was telling myself, but this is nothing. It's okay. There's nothing to worry about here. And just repeatedly, wave after wave after wave. That particular night, then I went into this dream state. And while I was on the dream state, I was shown the ruin of a church. I said, okay, we're on the island, there's the church. What are you wanting to show me? I needed to go back to the church, and I went to the church, and there was a hole in the ground. And as I approached the hole in the ground, there were these like leather straps, trinkets all around the hole. And I remember lifting them up in my hand, and I seen that they were Celtic. And I remember noting it in my head at the time, but it was then that there was the connection to the serpent that came through from the pit. And I understood that was the place that this happened. And I remember in that particular dream state noting, my God, we're standing on a pit of serpents. After coming out of that, we left the following morning. That was enough for me. I said, right, okay. It was, and I got to say that the fear that came with this was staggering. It was like nothing else. People will say that the atmosphere here is pretty thick, but when you cross over to this other side, the feelings that we have here, like love and fear and everything else, is much more enhanced. And I gotta say, that's what I was feeling, and it was so overwhelming. It really did frighten me. And we got the hell off the island. By the time Cormac was awake, I had the tent in the boat, and the dog and I were in the boat sitting waiting on Cormac, and we got the hell off the island. And I said I would never be back on that island. I said, never again do I want to be involved with the like of that. And it took about a year for me to understand what that was, and understand that needed to happen. That was a thing that changed my paradigm. It lifted me out of where I was and set me on a new path.
Where did it set you on?
It set me on the path of understanding what our Neolithic were doing, and what the chamber was that was being used. And whenever I went back and started analysing what was left behind, I found the remains of the passage chamber. Now, the passage chamber was built in Ireland before the Great Pyramids of Giza. These things were designed on a specific pattern. And from a bird's eye view, the pattern remained the same for the passage chamber. And the clue was in the word. Passageway to where exactly? And in the west of Ireland, you have these stone structures that have carvings along each side. In fact, even over in Meath, you have Northduff and Newgrange, which are huge complexes, Neolithic complexes dedicated to the sun, the moon. They're huge timepieces, if you like. But again, they have these inscriptions on the walls. And these inscriptions, we were led to believe, was from regular archaeology, was, oh, this is a sign of life and death and the sun and the moon and everything else. And it was very what we see. But these places were not built for what we see. These places were built for something else. And that intrigued me. I said, there's something more here. I'm being moved from where I was to look at this in particular. There was something I had to look at. 75% of all Neolithic art appears in Ireland. From all over Europe, 75% appears in Ireland on the chamber walls. And it was later development that we were able to see that from the aerial view, the design of these chambers are in a cruciform style. And in fact, they have a domed ceiling. Now, when you look at this from an aerial position, you're looking at a Celtic cross. A Celtic cross that we were told was delivered to us between the 2nd and 5th century. That's not necessarily true. Because these things were being used way before. But I was always having a problem in trying to connect. You know, I've been to many different haunted houses over the time with GHI and what I did and all the rest. And there are times that I can connect with these energies, whatever you want to call them, and understand what they were. But the people who built these, I was struggling to make a connection with. I understood that there was something more powerful than a singular person here. There was something bigger.
Well, what was it? What was it?
I don't. Even today, I'm still struggling with that because the message is still coming through. Now, this is 3 years later, and the track that we went on was absolutely amazing. It was fantastic to understand this and understand that the inscriptions on the walls were actually relating to a frequency. There were various different frequencies that were inscribed in the walls, and they were not the reference to the sun and the moon and everything else. No, it was actually a particular frequency. And when you have the crucifix form, you've got the 3 tips within the chamber. You place a person in each of those tips, and using the Mongolian style throat music from the chest, it creates this low frequency. Mm-hmm. Now, the frequency itself, of course, varies from place to place, but the earliest depiction that we have of a Celtic cross is the 8th century, and it's carved on the side of a monastery in Ireland. And that in itself shows the 3 heads with their mouths open, but in the center of that particular cruciform is a spiral that's leading out, and a spiral that has a giant serpent attached to it, consuming the person coming in. And that was from the 8th century, so we were well into Christianity at that stage, and yet the idea of what this passage chamber was still being inscribed and understood in the 8th century. So this led on further again anyway, but to draw it to a close, what do I still understand from that? I understand that the people who built these were definitely very well aware of what they were doing with harmonics. And they were very well aware about what they were opening the doorway to. But the thing is, and may shed some light onto why I couldn't connect, research from the Australian University has been checking the DNA structure from Europeans, modern Europeans. And we can see all the way back through the DNA and the influence of all the different tribes within Europe to the present day. But something happens around 2600 BC, because at that particular point, the people who built the chambers in Ireland disappear. And our genetic code stops. They are not infused in our DNA. And they don't know why. There's a huge mystery there as to what that is. And that I think is going to be something that I'm going to be working on, to try and connect and try and bridge that divide, because there is a divide, and it's something that I'm finding a problem to break through to get to these ancestors.
You think it could have been some sort of portal to something, or?
Do I think the passage chambers were an opening to another? Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Call it the world, the doorway to the gods, if you like.
And it wouldn't have been it's not like, physically we can walk through there, but it's something. It's bringing something else through. Something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And with that, there's always been stories of, and it's strange that standing on this particular, during that dream state on the island, standing at the edge of this doorway, I could hear the serpents inside. And serpents have always been connected with knowledge and the Kundalini and all the rest and all that stuff. And yet here in Ireland, we have St. Patrick, who came to Ireland to get rid of serpents when there never were serpents in Ireland. So we had an easy job. But when you start understanding that the church even knew up to the 8th century that these places were still connected with that, there may have been that eradication that was going on, this dominance of the new religion coming on to try and say, well, okay, that doesn't work, this will work.
That's interesting, isn't it? That what were they doing with that? Was it like our kind of Ouija board where we connect to things on that sometimes? Was it some other form of dimensional contact or something like that?
I think there was dimensional contact going on. Yes, absolutely.
In Ireland.
Well, this is the thing. We're starting to find these all over the world. And
the same formations.
The same formations. Yes.
What other countries?
Peru, in fact, I was in. I was up in the Andes at. Oh my goodness! Let's see if I can remember the name of that city. It was the city was buried under an avalanche, and they just recently excavated it. I can't remember the name offhand.
Right.
But I was in this chamber, and you have to descend underground to get to this chamber.
Wow.
Within the chamber itself, they've got this huge structure. It was a 10-ton pink granite structure right in the heart of this chamber. And it's actually quite imposing when you walk in. Chavin, that was it. Yes, it came to me now. Chavin. And this 10-ton structure was a carving of their godlike beings. And it's quite imposing when you're walking toward it, especially in the darkness, and you just got this lit in the center. And at the time, it never crossed my mind what the style was, because this was before I went to the island. And this particular place in Peru is in the cruciform. And the center was always important, even from the Neolithic perspective. The center was always important. The thing was, that particular piece of stone was absolutely still. Now, we tested it. It was just a piece of rock. But the moment that we criticized the belief system, well, I must admit, it wasn't me that criticized the belief system, it was the people I was with, criticized the belief system of the Peruvian people, suddenly, this particular stone started producing a vibration. And we started recording the vibration. And not only recording a vibration, but we were recording sound emanating from the stone that sounded like voice. And this went for half an hour.
And you've got that on your website?
Oh, no, that's in my own private collection.
You never released it?
No.
Would you?
Possibly, maybe.
Why haven't you released it?
Because that was for me. That was my experience.
Do you think the rock? Do you think that it wasn't the rock, was it? But what was really coming through? What was really happening there? Do you think?
I suspect, when you go to places like that, the veil is thin, and for some reason that pink granite was very important to them. granted, pink granite can produce piezoelectricity higher than any other, and things like that. But was that singularly responsible? No, there was something else. And not only that, you find the same formation in King Solomon's Temple, in the former King Solomon's Temple, of course, that design layout, and in Malta.
It's interesting, isn't it? All these ancient structures, you know, all with similarities, you know, all popping up across the world at the same time. And, you know, if anything's going to last throughout the ages, it's going to be stone, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it makes you think, well, what are these remnants? What are the other remnants that are in stone? That's, you know, from Stonehenge to the pyramids to the other monuments that are out there. What life used to exist on this planet, and in what form?
Yeah, and you know, even taking that particular understanding and understanding that what we see over the ages of the stone being the site being repeatedly used is a building style which is built on top of the other, and top of the other, and top of the other, which degrades. You know, we see a degradation of the building quality as it goes along, and also gets smaller. You know, whenever you look at some of the ancient structures, the stones are massive. And then we start building on top of that, and we start building on top of that, and on top of that, and the quality of building style, it becomes degraded. And I wondered to myself, what is it that we're losing? You know, what is it that we've lost, and why did the people who built that? Where are they? What's the trace of them? Was there a reset button hit at some particular point? And you know, these are things that I ponder, and I wondered to myself, is there going to come a time when we hit a reset button?
And what other sacred sites in Ireland are there that people can go and visit?
You can go to Carrickeel if you wish in Sligo. That will be open 24/7, 365 days a year. There's no limitation on it. Ireland is littered with these sites. You've got Lough Crew, the Witches' Mountain in Meath. They are North Duff, Newgrange in Meath as well. And it was also interesting to note that, you know, recently now I've been working the past year and a half. I've been working on developing new software to identify these key areas around the planet, and where we find more activity than anywhere else. And I found it very, very interesting that the ancient structures, especially the largest ancient structures in Ireland, were found in one of the biggest and strongest magnetic anomalies in Ireland. And I found that odd. You know, how was it that they were able to identify that? And I've seen other places where magnetic anomalies exist, and I know there should be Neolithic structures there. And whenever I do the investigation, I find that modern man has destroyed them. But we know that they were there. They were targeted by the Neolithic.
So, where has this worked into your research into ufology? Because that's another interest of yours as well.
Yeah. For me, I was coming at this because ufology wasn't my main thing. You know, I was looking at this. I was looking at other aspects of the mysterious world from a different perspective, and I found myself taking the subject of ufology and T-boning it from my perspective, to look at the phenomena that was happening there, and seeing that, well, wait a minute, the phenomena that's being reported today was happening 200 years ago, and if we look at that from 200 years ago and go back another 300 years, it's the same phenomena, just a different mask.
So, for example, what dragons maybe were?
Now, that's a very, very interesting subject that you bring up, because dragons, the interpretation of what we think a dragon to be today, a large creature with wings, was not what our ancients would have identified as. To them, that's as alien to them as an electric kettle. So a dragon to them was actually a giant serpent. When you go back and you start looking at this particular, the serpentine connection, you start finding that all over the world.
You know, when I interviewed Phil Corso, the son of Colonel Corso, his dad, before he passed, had created a model of what this craft potentially would have looked like, and it looked very serpenty. It was not round.
Mm-hmm. It is very, very unusual, you know, again, you don't have to go too far to find this connection with, and I gotta say, giant serpents around. They were almost, what I can see through the history is that they're almost like gatekeepers to this world of the gods.
And would a giant serpent be an analogy for something else potentially?
I can see where that possibly would be coming from. However, having experienced it on the island, I know that's definitely, there is a serpentine connection here. Now, whenever I say serpentine, of course, that can lead into many other things. So when we consider the aspect of primates, for instance, that's an umbrella term. And within the primate structure, you find humans. Now, whenever I'm talking about serpents is in that particular structure underneath, and I hate to use it because there are so many other connections to this, but we find serpents under the umbrella of reptile. And even in ancient Egyptian references to these particular places, you'll find giant circles circled by a serpent, and these were, yes, in reference to the sun, but they were also in reference to Ammon, which was the creator god who came through into this world from the primordial mound. And you've got the Choctaw traditions, of course, who say that they believed that they came through this mound onto the surface, a mound that was guarded by giant serpents. You find these particular components in Irish structure, which is almost reflecting a type of serpentine worship almost. I prefer not to say serpentine worship, it doesn't fit right, but there is definitely a serpentine connection with these particular structures, which is very, very odd.
So with your UFO research then, what direction has that taken for you in your understanding of what this phenomena could be?
So my take on ufology is that I'm seeing the same phenomena, only under a different mask. And if we apply what is happening in certain aspects of ufology, and we take that back 200 years, this is the same phenomena that our ancestors were telling us about in Ireland, which they termed belong to the nature spirits, the fairy, if you like. I prefer not to use the term fairy because that's always associated now in the present terms with Disney and all the rest, and that's not what they were. Now, if you take that back further, you look at a woodcut, for instance, from France from the 15th century, and you'll find a carving of small demons with pikes that are jabbing into the abdomens of people. Again, the same phenomena connected, certain types of phenomena connected. Same phenomena, different mask. So that's what I'm seeing, and that's the way I'm coming at this, not on the understanding that possibly they're all coming from out there, rather that they're already here. And whatever these things are have been here for a very, very long time.
Would you say they're here now? They're here now.
Do I believe that they're here? Yes, not in this room, but as in a global aspect, yes, I would say that they're here. Many times they come back and forward. In fact, Dorothy Izett, a Canadian lady, done fascinating work on videoing these ripples as these things, this light was coming through. And this rippling effect is something that we also see in just before abduction cases and things like that. Even certain, I've spoken to oh my God, come on brain. I've spoken to National Park employees, and they have come across these particular things as well, that this rippling effect that's almost like the surface of water in front of them. They can, they understand that it's rippling, but they can see through it to the things on the other side. But if they put their foot through it, it's like putting it into water. Yet this thing's standing up straight. These doorways are something which again we're finding more concentrated within the magnetic anomalies. So that's something that we want to understand, and we see a side effect to these magnetic anomalies as well, because along with the positive magnetic anomalies, where you've got all these ranges of increased numbers of strangeness, high strangeness that occurs. Within the negative ones, we also find 70% of all top suicide locations appear within the negative anomalies. Now I know that there was work that was done by Russians and I think it was Australians, who also showed that certain areas around the planet can affect us, and in a detrimental way. So it's good, I feel, to understand the planet that we live on, and give us a foot up, to understand, well, okay, these magnetic anomalies, they're not going to go away. It's something that we need to understand, and we can understand that there are things that also utilize the magnetic anomalies.
But are you saying that when these beings walk around us or among us, the ripples are an effect of that, or are you not connecting that together?
No. The ripple effect is the doorway. That is the film. And interestingly enough, during some EVP tests that were carried out in California, the question was being asked over and over and over and over, and it was a term that was being used as to what this was, and it kept coming back, film. It was a film. Now, film is a terminology used by the Irish. That's our slang for the movies. Instead of us saying we're going to the film, it's film. And I found that unusual that that particular term would be used on the other side of the world, in California, to describe this doorway, because portal, it seems, is not the proper term. I was intrigued by that.
But how is that connected to the beings? I'm just confused there. How is...
Because that's where they come through.
So
this weakening, almost.
So they're not, their ships aren't in the sky, for example, camouflaged, and somehow they're down here. You're saying they move.
That a lot of that, I believe, is the magician's hand, as a distraction. Certainly from the experiences that I've had, while we're being entertained by this hand, we're not watching the other one. And that was interesting, because whenever this was going off and I set people to watch what was going on behind us, that's whenever there was the reports coming back of these particular things walking around on the outer perimeter of where we were at camp.
So you think when we see something in the sky, that's a distraction for something else taking place?
I do, yeah. My instinct, my connection is saying, okay, that's the distraction. What else is going on? And I'm very aware of that particular influence, that distraction that's going to happen is more likely to happen with these magnetic anomalies.
But when that distraction is taking place, so we're seeing something blipping in and out of our reality, right? Mm-hmm. What is that, though?
That we don't know. That we even if we were to use specialized cameras, that will not happen. The moment that there's a camera comes on scene, it ain't going to happen. That's what I've always found, and I always find that very interesting, that even if we hit a camera, it won't happen.
But some have said, that they've come forward with photographic evidence.
I can show you plenty of photographic evidence of ghosts, but as a ghost, that's the thing.
So what is that? So if that isn't a craft, could some be crafts? Could some be?
Well, absolutely, yes. I definitely think so. In fact, I think that my own belief system would be the triangles that people have often talked about. They would be very much man-made, and be interesting to see later on down the line if that actually bears fruit.
So when you had an experience last night, because I know you did have one, you were able to call this, whatever this is in, this distraction in?
Oh, I wouldn't have said that I called it in. It was just that we were at that particular point. That was a site of a magnetic anomaly that wasn't explored, and that's why we went there.
How did you know that site you went to was a magnetic anomaly?
Because we use satellites to identify the magnetic anomalies around the planet.
I see. So when you went there, that's when, but then did you call it in your mind? Did you say, I want to see something?
There was, well, not so much that I want to see something. I just put it out there that we're just about to leave, and and then poof, there it was.
So what is that to you, even now?
That to me, I'm still thinking about, okay, what's going on the ground. I'm not so much up there. I'm thinking about ground level.
And what do you think is going on the ground?
I had no idea. I was very careful about watching the ground level, but nothing stirred. But again, it was absolutely pitch dark.
Do you think they have an influence on us?
To a certain point, yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm just asking that. Do you think they've got negative intentions?
There are aspects of it, yes, that I see. The idea of targeting the T4 in the spine and shutting down the body's motor responses during that particular period. Yes, there are theories that my wife has been working on that they're actually influencing mucous membranes of the particular people. We also see a connection here with iron, in that there are certain points in time that they will target the person when the iron count is low. And interestingly enough, that it is something worth noting that within the Celtic nation, the people who've been dealing with the Fae and everything else, they're above anybody else within the human race. They're the people who suffer from high iron in the blood, which ultimately can kill them. But that's something which is always useful for dealing with these particular things.
Could some of the experiences people have be positive?
Yes. Absolutely.
Would you say that the UFO phenomena is more about consciousness and spirituality, or always seems to lead to that there is something more than just nuts and bolts going on here?
Oh, there's more than nuts and bolts. Yes, absolutely. And there is a part of a conscious connection that has to be made, and it's very, very interesting to see where that's going. You know, again, you know, I'm in a life's path, and I'm being introduced to a lot of this stuff.
How do you protect yourself if it is negative?
I'll not comment on that one.
But
I do.
Okay. And what would be, as we have to wrap up here, what would be an important message of your work?
What an important message that I'd like to get out is always make sure that your information is right. Always double check. I by no means am I religious, but there is a message certainly in the big book that says, make sure that your spirit is of God. And that is always something that I drive toward. I've seen a lot of deception within the field, and it's something that always makes sure that you're comfortable and you're listening to your own truth, that what you're getting is true.
Do you think there is deception in this field?
Absolutely. I do believe there's deception in the field. A lot of it.
Why?
I don't know.
But this is what you feel?
This is what I've seen and feel.
Intuition and practical?
Absolutely.
And just finally, very, very quickly, be real quick here, where does the abduction phenomena fit in with that as well, or the experience phenomena?
Oh, it fits in very comfortably, but with figures that are released, you know, that we've been tracking with, along with the magnetic anomalies and everything else, 4.5 million people have disappeared in the last 20 years off this planet, and they have not come back. 4.5 million people, that is the population of New Zealand.
Where are they going?
Globally, we don't know. We can't stop it.
Could they be murders? Could they?
No. These are unusual circumstances. These are not people who are kidnapped or murdered or anything else. These are something else.
Are they going to other realities?
It is quite possible.
Well, Barry, just thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.